and I was so burnt out. And when my brother passed away, I was like, I'm done. Like, this is not where I belong. This is not who I am. And life is too short to stay in places where you don't get to express who you are. If you have a sense of who you are, I think some of us, we like end up in places where like, I don't know how I'm here and I'm fine. But I felt that discord. And I think I felt very much my brother was an artist. And I think I felt very much, he was an artist, but more than that, he was the kind of person that, like, you know, people who met him for 20 seconds walked away being like, I'm a good person, you know, like he brought that to the world. And I think I very much felt like that the work that I do is charged by that. Like, he's not here, I am. And I found this path to, you know, again, like that crack through the rocks. This voice has never left me. And it felt like, you know, if ever there was a time to just be like, I'm going to do this. I'm this strange little project I have of drawing strangers is maybe the most powerful thing I can do in the world and for myself. And like, I can't abandon it.
Welcome to the Growth and Thriving podcast, where we celebrate those who have overcome great adversity and trauma in their lives and examine the tools and techniques by which people recover, grow, and create a life that feels like thriving for them. I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak, and today we are talking to a longtime friend of mine, author, illustrator, and founder of Drawn on the Way, Sarah Nisbett. And Sarah and I have known each other probably close to 20 years.
Terrifyingly, I think that's true.
And we first met when I was working as a personal trainer in New Jersey at New York Sports Club. And Sarah was a client there and a master's student at the Princeton Choir College. Mm-hmm. So in addition to being an accomplished artist and author, Sarah is an amazing singer. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I've been following you for a while now, and I'm excited about everything you're up to, including this. So
thank you so much. I felt I jumped into this because I felt like lots of people work on like treating trauma when people are suffering, right? When people have PTSD or some depression or something, and there's lots of people doing treatment. There aren't too many people working on the side of like what life looks like after, you know, and there's research that demonstrates that people who have been through real adversity tend to do better, you know, and thrive and achieve great things sometimes than those who haven't. So, So why don't we take a few minutes? I mean, I introduced you as author, illustrator, founder of Drawn on the Way. I'm familiar with Drawn on the Way because I've been following it on Facebook before it was even a Facebook page, right? It started as just your Facebook page and you were just doodling people on the subway.
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what it is you do and some of the accomplishments, right? That You Are the Work of Art was a big one. We'll talk about that and just let people know what you're up to. And then maybe we'll work backward and see how you wound up here.
That sounds great. We see if we can figure out how it is that I ended up here. I'm still working on that. So I accidentally started a project that's now coming up on its almost 10-year anniversary. It's called Drawn on the Way. And it got that name because when I was living in New York City, I started drawing people on the subway, which I'll tell the story of how it started, and then I'll explain what it is. Please. I think that's a good way to do it. So as you said, I was an opera singer. I moved to New York to pursue opera. And shortly after moving to New York, I was kind of like, I don't think this lifestyle is for me. It's so much travel. It's like so chaotic. Like the more successful I got, like the less happy I was. And I was like, that's weird. So I decided to see what would happen if I stopped singing. And I started pursuing a career in advertising, which I'd always had an interest in. And I was doing a lot of temping in the interim. So that kind of weird transition point. And that's when I found myself on the subway one day and was just like, I can't look at a screen anymore. Like all day, I'm just like a nameless person in a nameless office staring at a computer screen. And I'm just like, I can't look at my phone. I can't do this. And I'd always been a doodler. So I had a little sketchbook with me that was like filled with like doodles. And I took it out and I just like had no inspiration. There was like nothing in my mind that I was like, I want to draw like a cat in space. There's just like nothing. And that was really unusual for me too. And so I just started looking around the train and I was like, well, maybe something will inspire me here. And I saw this gentleman, 80 years old, if he was a day old. And he was wearing a 3-piece brown leisure suit with a vest, a fedora, like a paisley tie, and just like matching umbrella. And he was going into the city when everyone else was going out. And I was like, who is this person? Like, who is this dude? He's got to have a story. And so I kind of got thinking about him and I thought, I'm going to draw him. And despite knowing very precisely in my mind that I could never draw from life, like I'd spent my whole life specifically not doing that because I knew I was bad at it. I decided to do it. When I finished, I was like, hey, that didn't suck as much as I thought it was going to. And I actually loved the process of doing it. And I was like, that's pretty fun. So then the next day I got on the train, I did it that next morning on my commute to my temp job and did it that morning or that, afternoon coming home, and the next day and the next day and the next day until, we are here now, which is having created this project that's dedicated to drawing the world as I see it on the way. And I'm a self-taught artist, and that is now my full-time profession. And I like to say that this project has very much taught me how to draw, but also how to see. So how to really see the world as a place that's filled with stories, and to see people as works of art. And that's a big part of the mission of this project, and is to help inspire people to see the world in a different way, to really look for the extraordinary in the everyday, and to see themselves and other people as works of art. Because I think it's so easy to overlook each other, especially these days. So that's at the heart of the mission.
And so, for something that you sort of fell ass backward into, right, without any real, all this, write a business plan and have a strategy, and right, but you've had you've had success, which is great, but you've had some pretty cool landmarks, right? The piano in Manhattan, the book. Now, can you talk about a few of those landmarks and let people know what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely fell ass backwards into this. Like I always say, it's like I started this accidentally. And so, started sharing it on Instagram, started realizing, I am actually doing something. This isn't just, this is a hobby. At the time it was a hobby, but it began to turn into something kind of more serious and more deliberate on my part. And so started kind of like trying to share this message more. So the New York Pianos was super awesome. There's a group called Sing for Hope in New York, and they do these amazing public pianos, and they literally put a piano on a street corner and it's there for 3 weeks, and anyone can come play it pretty much any time of day. And they're all decorated by artists that are chosen to do this. So that was I think 2 years ago now. So I got to create a piano that lived in Marcus Garvey Park in New York, and it was decorated with all the faces of people that I had seen throughout the years on the subway, and it was a really cool experience too, because it right in big letters said, you are a work of art, and it had that mission statement of encouraging people to see the people around them and to think about who they are, and begin that kind of process of like curiosity, and allowing that curiosity to kind of breed empathy and connection. And that was that was a very cool project to be involved in. And then the piano is donated to a school in New York. And the school that my piano went to, they did not have a piano in the building. So that is their only piano, which like on so many levels.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've got a book now?
I have a book coming out called, which I also accidentally fell ass backwards into. It is called Drawn on the Way, A Guide to Capturing the Moment Through Live Sketching. And I'm really excited about it being out in the world because I had a publisher approach me to ask me if I wanted to write this book. And I'd actually been working on a different book proposal, and they were like, would you like to write this book? And I was like, yeah, here's my book proposal. And they were like, no, we do instructional stuff. And I was like, I'm self-taught. I couldn't teach anybody. And then they were like, no, you really could. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I have so much to say and so much I want to share with people. And I think the biggest thing I'm excited about for the book is that I sort of describe it almost as like a Trojan horse. Like, it's like the book is a million different ways to support people just picking up a pen and trying to draw their world. Because I think there's so many barriers that like come with that. People are like, I'm not an artist. I can't do this. I don't have talent. My work doesn't look like somebody else's. And those are all kind of the battles that I fought along the way of this accidental path to being an artist and an illustrator and author. And like, it's very much, again, like my mission to like give back people, to people their own perspective of the world that's theirs. Like, to be creative. So
I think, it's interesting how we like have this default setting to sort of underappreciate what we have to offer, right? Because of what it's not.
Yes.
Instead of thinking about, what it is. And I think, I think there's value probably in the world of, as somebody who's an academic himself, right, with a PhD, there's value in people conducting research and following scientific method and learning things that way, and managing error rates so that we can have some confidence, and managing bias so we can have some confidence. And so I think there's great value in people discovering and learning things by the rules. And I think there's equally great value in people who are learning and discovering things by deviating from those rules.
100%. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you reminded, you're an opera singer, but you reminded me of, at the height of their popularity, when Van Halen was a very big deal. I remember an interview with Eddie Van Halen, who is, you can't have a discussion about the greatest guitar players in history without his name popping up, right? And his dad was a classical musician, so he and his brother were classically trained on piano, but he taught himself how to play guitar. And he was self-taught, and he's widely known as an innovator of a style that nobody had prior. And in this interview, he said essentially, what I was saying about, he said that there's value in learning how to play classically, but when you do that, you're sort of learning by the book. And when you pick up a guitar and just teach yourself, you're sort of writing the book. And so that sounds a lot like what you have done.
I love that. That's like so actually apt for my process too, because what I was going to say is I feel like drawing, the process of becoming a visual artist, I think is in direct reaction to the process that I went through to become a musical artist. And there is so much that like in the process of classical music training, it's a lot of like, do it, from your heart, and as you are as an artist, express your soul, except if you don't do it this way, which I personally, as your teacher, I'm telling you is the only way. And then you repeat that with like your teacher, your coach, the conductor, your colleagues, like everyone is sort of telling you exactly how to do it, and sort of like overriding your innate creativity and talent and like heart and motivation. And there's so much critique. And I feel like the process of drawing, like when I started drawing on the train, I was like, oh, do I want to get some lessons? Do I want to like learn how to do all these like, more sophisticated artistic techniques that I don't know how to do? And I was like, no, I think I'll just figure it out, because there was like, it felt like it was tapping into like this part of me that was like desperate to be in the world in like an unfettered way and be creative. And
Oh,
and I feel like by somehow I had this sense to preserve that. And I'm so glad I did, because I feel like I ended up in this place where I, yeah, exactly like Van Halen. It's like I literally wrote the book of like, here's a way you can be creative that isn't like damaging and only adds to your life.
and I like how you say it. Here's a way you can be creative, not here's the way to be creative, right? Here's how I
Exactly.
did it and try it out,
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel
Exactly.
like classical training in any of the arts always starts with like express yourself from your heart, be an artist. And so I imagine that almost like a Jackson Pollock, right? We're taking bits of our soul and throwing them on the canvas. And then
Mhm.
the classical training sort of takes out a file and files away all the edges until the circles are perfect and the lines are straight right. And
Yeah.
in certain areas, if you can be in an orchestra, right, that's necessary, right? You
Yeah.
can't play in an orchestra and be a jazz kind of soloist.
Yeah.
But yeah, but could you imagine this book publisher going to Eddie Van Halen and saying, "Hey, we want you to write a book on how to play guitar," and him saying, "Oh, I can't teach anybody. I'm self-taught."
Right. Right. No, it's when you like zoom out, like I like looking back, I feel like I actually can't believe that I even said that when the editor, when I talked to her, I was like, I'm self-taught. I call someone else. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, that is so crazy, because I literally, when I wrote the book, I actually wrote like 2 books worth of content. Like I had to like literally edit out like
Yeah.
an entire extra book because I had a page count that I had to meet. And I was like, yeah, it's so funny. I thought I had nothing to say. And then it turns out I had like 2 books worth of things to say. So yeah.
And in a way, what's funny, and I think this is sort of key and important and plays very much into what I do when I'm coaching people, right? Because this is a phenomenon that I think is well, in my experience, it's really common. I don't have data. I don't know how common exactly. The people I see are sort of a self-selecting population because they come to me,
Right.
but I encounter this often, and that is your knee-jerk reaction to being offered an opportunity was in direct contrast to what you're trying to provide for other people, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to uninhibit other people and allow them to view themselves as a work of art with all their perfections and scars and broken parts and empower them and get them to see their value. And as soon as somebody said, "Hey, we value what you do, would you share it?" You were like, "Oh, I don't have
Yeah. 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 100%. Like at a certain point, I was working on the book and I called my best friend and I was like, telling her like all my like insecure thoughts about everything. And she was like, it's weird because I feel like somebody I know just wrote a book where they said all these like really inspiring things about how to like trust what you're doing and like it's okay to make mistakes. And I was like, is that person me? Because I think I should probably reread that. But yeah,
value."
it's absolutely. And I think and that was like when it's really interesting that was kind of my reaction too, because that was the thing I said to the editor when I first talked to her, is I said, I would do this book, but it is important to me that you understand like this is not a prescriptive book. It's not going to be instructions like draw like me. It's going to be about giving people the ability to draw like them, whatever that looks like. And I was like, as long as like, I think that was like, again, it was like with this project, there have been so many places where like a voice that I'm not always connected to has been like really strong and just been like, not perpetrating more critique and more, expectations out in the world. I'm trying to create something for people. And like, that's, yeah.
It sounds like that voice had to get stifled enough that it had no chance but to kick down the door, right? Like between the cubicle and the screens all day and the computer and the commute and the phone and right, that voice had to just kick in
Yeah.
the door and say, "Let me out."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think finding a medium, I think like it does feel very much like it found a crack in the rock, and it just found its way out. And I feel like singing I think it's still very much the same through line of like of trying to, I think, tell a story and make people feel something and share another view with people. And I think I did that when I was a singer, and I did that when I worked in marketing in my own way. And I feel like there's this thread, and I feel like it's finally kind of emerged in a way that's like unbound by expectations of like, this is what classical music is like, or this is the deadline, this is what the client wants. I feel like that voice was like, I need to exist in my own strange, specific way, and I'm gonna just keep talking until you let me speak. So yeah, it feels it's disparate lives that I've sort of lived, opera singer, marketer, illustrator, but they're all the same instinct. I see that more clearly now.
Yeah, and that's the same guiding force, right? The same Sherpa.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share some of, the personal side of your life. I mean, because what I love about what you do, I mean, I love that it features other people and that it makes other people their appearance. And what's cool is if anybody hasn't seen your artwork, or go on Facebook or Instagram and check out Drawn on the Way, but your style, at least for me, I react to it in a way where every picture tells a really cool story, right? It's like, it's, I don't know. I mean, there are still lives in the museum where I see a basket of fruit or something, or a horn of apples. And I'm like, wow, the painting technique is beautiful. You can see where the light is and the shadow is, and it's right on point. But I don't walk away with a story of, you talk about that 80-year-old guy in a 3-piece leisure suit on the subway. And like the Manhattan that I know, or I guess we always took the train into Manhattan, but any of the 5 boroughs, the New York City that I know has those characters everywhere. And that picture, I remember that picture. I remember when you posted that picture, like made that guy, like made me curious about him, made it interesting. So what you do not only features other people, but I feel like there's a big part of vulnerability in it for you, because knowing you, I can see that there's some of your soul in each of those pictures.
That is wonderful to hear, because that is, I think that's very much true. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think we could do your story justice without allowing people to know you personally a little bit. So that's what I'm asking for now, is if you could sort of connect what you're doing professionally and just let people know you a little bit, where you come from, whatever, important events in your life, and times, good times, bad times, whatever you're willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I'm so glad that comes through, because I think that, like I said, that is more and more I realize, I think my purpose in life is to share that, that idea with people, that like, you are worthy. And I think the more I sort of do this work, and the more that I get into this, the more I realize that it's very much related to my own path, right? Like it's not accidental that I'm find myself being sort of obsessive with, I've drawn like 5,000 people. And somebody asked me, I'll talk a little bit about myself, but somebody asked me like recently, they're like, have you ever done a self-portrait? And I was like, no, I never have. But I think in many ways that all of the drawings of people I make are in some ways a form of self-portrait, because they're like putting out into the world this idea of like, I see you in all your flaws and all your perfections. I see you as a complete person, and I think you're worthy. And I think like every drawing I make is a mirror to like say that back to myself.
And many of those drawings, it's not even I see you head on, right? Sometimes I'm behind you and I see you at an angle, and a big chunk of the picture is the back of somebody's head with a little cheekbone, or though exactly. I find those really interesting, right? And the perspective,
and I think like that aspect of like of like looking for those little moments. I think I think I'm always looking for that story and for that interest, and like I think I'm always like, that's how I experience the world, is I'm always looking for like, what is interesting, what is happening beyond just what you see. and like telling those stories to myself and telling those stories about myself and other people. So I think like, yeah, I think that's a big part of like why I look for those kind of scenes and moments, is to like just be like, does anyone else see the world this way, or is it just me, or can I show you? But yeah, I you know, I think the biggest catalyst in many ways for me to continue doing what I've been doing is, I think, you know, my brother passed away 3 years ago now, and he took his own life, and probably gonna cry, but that's been a huge motivator for me.
Yeah.
I knew I was gonna cry. I can't talk about it and not cry.
Hey, if you're gonna cry about anything, like there's not much that's more worthy of it.
Yeah. And for me, when he passed away, I was at the height of my marketing career. I'd climbed the ladder very quickly, and I was working 70-hour weeks, and I was so burnt out, and I was like, there is just no purpose to this. Like, I'm working for, you know, I'm working for clients that don't care about me. They don't care about anything that they're sort of asking for from the world. And I was so burnt out. And when my brother passed away, I was like, I'm done. Like, this is not where I belong. This is not who I am. And life is too short to stay in places where you don't get to express who you are, if you have a sense of who you are. I think some of us, we like end up in places where like, I don't know how I'm here and I'm fine. But I felt that discord. And I think I felt very much my brother was an artist. And I think I felt very much, he was an artist, but more than that, he was the kind of person that, like, you know, people who met him for 20 seconds walked away being like, I'm a good person, you know, like he brought that to the world. And I think I very much felt like that the work that I do is charged by that. Like, he's not here, I am. And I found this path to, you know, again, like that crack through the rocks. This voice has never left me. And it felt like, you know, if ever there was a time to just be like, I'm gonna do this. I'm this strange little project I have of drawing strangers is maybe the most powerful thing I can do in the world and for myself. And like, I can't abandon it. And I have to see where it will take me. And I have to sort of like carry this legacy on for myself, but also for this person who brought that to the world and who saw that in me. So that's a huge part, like, of finding the courage to like keep doing this, even when there is no path to become a live illustrator of people on the subway. Like, that's not a career. So it's very much, yeah, that's been a huge part of like the days where I'm like, what am I doing?
How do you describe it on LinkedIn, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, how do you tell people, you know, I trust strangers. I trust strangers.
yeah. I think, you know, I mean, you said it sort of quickly, and that's totally fine. But I think there's an important, you didn't say it explicitly, but I think it was implied, and correct me if I'm wrong, because whether you implied it or not, I inferred it.
Yeah.
But I think there was an implied idea in there because, you know, and I could be also projecting a little because you and I have some similar experiences. I mean, I lost my mother when I was very young, when I was 7. And so I understand that kind of like, that's a different category of grief, right? Like, it's always hard when a loved one dies, but, you know, a close friend in some cases, or a like good grandparent, for example, who's late in life, and it's not trying to minimize it, but it's natural, right?
Exactly.
And when it's, you know, my mother was 34, right, when she died. And so when
Yeah.
people die young like that, and when you're as connected to them as a child as to a parent or as a sibling, like you and your brother.
Yeah.
And I know you guys were very close because you used to talk about him quite a bit when we
Yeah.
were in the gym.
Yeah.
Um, it's a different it's a different category of grief, right? It's almost incorrect to use the same word to describe both experiences. And what I came to learn, although it took me a lot longer than you, I kind of wasted my whole childhood on being angry and wrapped up in my grief and sorrow. But what it eventually came to be was that, like, an experience as hurtful and profound as that can either be the reason why you never accomplish anything amazing, or it can be the reason why you have to.
So well said. Yes, so well said. I definitely, I remember very much in the immediate aftermath, thinking that, and having a sense of like, I have to, knowing that there was I was either going to get stuck in that place, and it's a compelling place to be stuck because it's overwhelming. There's so much to process, and I think it's really easy to like just sort of like, it's like, if you're on your journey, to just sort of be like, I'm just gonna sit here at the place where this happened, and this is where I have to be forever. Like, and I think it's really easy to, and I don't blame anybody who does that. Like, it's, and I think in some ways a part of you always stays there too.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but I think that, yeah, I think in many ways I realized, like, if I don't leave this place, if I don't begin the process of going forward from this, I will never leave. And I think like the best thing I can do is keep walking and keep letting this, like, because it really, it like the metaphor, like, that I remember in therapy talking about was like, it felt like, um my whole world sort of, it was like a pottery shop, and there was an earthquake and everything fell off the walls, and it's like you're cleaning up and you're like picking up pots and you're sort of like, oh, this one's not that broken, and you put it back on the shelf, and like you're like, this one is actually like too broken to put back together. So there's a lot of things, I think there's a lot of things you leave behind. There's a lot of things that you decide, I actually have to look at this and I have to fix this and I have to like strengthen it for myself. Like, and then there are things that you realize are actually still really intact. And I think for me, like, the drawing was one of the things that I was like, oh, it didn't break. Like, like, this is like, like, I feel, if anything, more like I understand why I do this, and what its purpose. So yeah.
And in the interest of beating that metaphor to death, right? Like if the earthquake kind of ruined your pottery shop, right? Your ceramic shop, and all you did was kind of open the door and look in,
Yeah,
right? Without taking piece by piece, if you just look in, you could very easily see that mess and just be like, okay, this is irreparable.
yeah,
Like, there's nothing to be salvaged.
yeah,
But until you start looking at each individual piece, that's where you find the parts that are not that broken and maybe could be turned into something even more beautiful than they were before the disaster.
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
But you have to be able to take that inventory, because if you just step back and look at the whole thing,
Yeah,
crippling.
100%, 100%. Yeah, and there's definitely a, and it's interesting because that up until that point, that was actually the I'd drawn every single day up until that point. And I think it was like 2 weeks maybe that I mean, I was like not on this planet. Like, I was, and I opened up one day I was like, I opened up my sketchbook and I was like, do I even care about this? Like, do I even care about this at all? And I was home and I wasn't in New York. I was like totally out of all the environments that I'd known to do this in. And I just drew my shoes that I'd been wearing the same pair of like winter boots, like, and I just drew them probably like 20 times. And I was like, I was like, okay, this is a place that I can be, you know? And it was like, it was like, okay, this is, you know, and that's something I've actually been curious to ask you about is you know, I think like, I feel sort of ignorant of like the art therapy aspects of this, but I know instinctively, I know that there are some, because I feel like it's a very like meditative thing to draw from life. And I think that like I very much found that in the aftermath of this, is that like for the 5 minutes that I'm doing this and I'm drawing my shoes, you know, like, or drawing somebody, I'm totally in the moment, and like everything else goes away. And that like little reprieve, I think I needed it in lots of ways in New York, but I didn't understand, because it's a very busy, crazy, wild place. And I think I found that, but I think on an emotional level, after I was, you know, gone through this, I think it gave that like, yeah, that oasis, that like reprieve from everything else happening.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I'm not very well trained in art therapy, which is sort of strange for me, because most of my life I considered myself an artist. I used to love to draw. I haven't drawn anything in years, but every once in a while I scribble out a cartoon for my kids or something.
Yeah.
But I used to, you know, through middle school and high school and some of college, I drew every day, and I was always in art classes, and always, and my stepmother really wanted me to. She wanted me to go into advertising because of the artist side, and I did end up working in marketing for a while, but also wasn't for me. Like,
Yeah.
But and so when I became a psychologist, for whatever reason, I never specialized much in art therapy. But I do think I think you're right on the money about like the mindfulness aspect of it. It makes you very much in the present, right? Especially, I would imagine, like on the subway, where somebody could move at any moment or get up or leave, or right. And you have to kind of capture them with some intention, right?
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
posing for you.
No, they're definitely not.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the ability to block out what's next, or what happened earlier, or to not ruminate, or is that kind of mindfulness, I imagine, is very important, especially in the way you draw, because you can't tell a model to just, oh no, put your hand back. All right.
Right. Right.
Move it,
Exactly.
it's moved. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and I think, you know, that it's been interesting, because the process of drawing for me, I think, is definitely like looked at some of the personality traits that I have, and sort of like turn them a bit on their head. Like, so I think I always draw in pen.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time that I ever drew on the train, when I drew that older gentleman, I just had a pen with me that I'd stolen from the office. And I drew in pen, and I think, again, it was like kind of one of these things that some part of me was like, never use a pencil, because I am such a perfectionist. And I always thought that was actually a really good trait, and I now realize that's not actually the like healthiest way to live your life. But I think that also was like almost a form of like exposure therapy. It was like, you are going to mess up, like you're absolutely like, and there was like a sort of like exposure therapy of like, you're going to be in the middle of a drawing that's like going so well, and then like that person's going to get up and leave, or someone's going to bump you, or you're going to make a mistake, you're going to put a mark in the wrong place, and you're going to ruin this drawing. And I think like getting like the exposure therapy of doing that multiple times a day, of just being like, things were going so well, and then I ruined it, or it got ruined, or whatever, and realizing like, and then I turned the page and I made another drawing, and it was actually better. Yeah. And like the metaphor of that is not lost on me. Yeah.
What Bob Ross would call the happy accidents.
Exactly. Happy accidents. And then the ones that are just like, you know, there's nothing to sell. Like, this drawing is totally unsalvageable now. And like, that's also fine.
Right. And the, you know, I'm imagining, because I don't do this practice of drawing like you do, but I'm imagining from other areas of my life that there's even the ones that are unsalvageable in such a way that maybe you don't share them on Facebook, maybe they didn't make it into your book or onto the piano, and they never get seen by maybe another set of eyes, right?
Mhm.
But in the moment that you were drawing it, there was value definitely for you, and maybe even for the person who didn't know they were a subject, right? Like
Yeah.
there was still like something for that 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it was, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, yeah, I think that's true. I think it's, yeah, I think that's definitely something I've I've explored for myself. It is reevaluating,
Right.
um, reevaluating, and learning how to, like, something I say now a lot is like evaluate by joy, not excellence.
Right. And right. And but maybe, maybe there's different measures for different, maybe there's some drawings where their value is in their ability to be shared, and the value is in their ability maybe even to be sold at some point. I mean, I know I bought a t-shirt and a and a postcard from you with
Yep,
your artwork on them as gifts for my stepmother for her birthday.
yep.
So maybe there is value in some of them, is, the value is in their ability to be shared, and maybe for other ones their value is private,
Yeah, absolutely,
in that moment.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and for me too, I think it is. I often find, like, I just went to the beach a couple weeks ago, and I made, like, exactly to that point. I drew a bunch of drawings of people on the beach, and I haven't shared any of them because I didn't really like any of them enough to be like, I want to show the world this drawing. This is like my best work. But like the other day, I was like flipping through that notebook before I put it away, and I was like, oh, that was like such a nice day. Like I like felt again the sensation of being there, and I was like, and also, and like the practice of like looking at those drawings and like again like accepting them, being like, this drawing, which is not perfect and is not my best work, doesn't mean I like have to stop being an artist right now, or like that I'm not capable of more. Like, I think that it's a very interesting thing to, like, especially when you start accruing like hundreds of these, it's like look back and just be like, yeah, it's all okay. Like, it's all okay.
I can even love this drawing
Yeah,
with
yeah,
its, even though it's not my best work, or right. Yeah.
yeah. And that's that, I think, is that like kind of, I think exposure therapy and like sort of like practicing that mindset, on an exterior thing that I think like it goes the other way, like both ways. I think I'd like, to your point, I think other people see that, I think, and then for myself, I know I slowly but surely am like absorbing that message.
Yeah. A minute ago, when you mentioned like drawing in pen because you're a perfectionist, and if you were to draw in pencil, right, it would constantly be adjusting, made me think of, Brene Brown in one of her books. I think it's Daring Greatly. She has an entire chapter dedicated to what perfectionism is and is not.
Oh, interesting. I think I will have to read that.
And she talks about it as being entirely antithetical to like growth.
Yeah.
Right? She talks about how, for example, like perfectionism is not the same thing as having high standards for ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because having high standards for ourselves means we want to achieve greater things, whether that's in music or art or mathematics, or it doesn't matter, right? Or engineering or career or as a parent or whatever. And in order to achieve those things, by definition, there has to be room to fail, right?
Yeah.
There has to be room.
Yeah.
And so she has she has a chapter's worth of these different things. But what I remember most, I read the book a few years ago, but what stands out to me most are 2 points that she made. One is that wanting to achieve or grow or accomplish is very much about me. It's very much about what I want for my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I choose to become a better mathematician as opposed to, say, a better musician, it's because that's what's speaking to me. That's what's fulfilling to me.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectionism is about the approval of other people.
interesting.
Without other people seeing me and being impressed with what I'm accomplishing, as opposed to me valuing it myself.
Wow.
Mm.
That
And
is very, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say the other comment she makes in the book is she compares perfectionism. She says we think that it's going to get us loved and a sense of belonging with other people, and really it ends up being a 10,000-pound shield that we have to lug around everywhere.
Yeah, wow. That is really interesting. I'm gonna have to go read that for sure. But I think that like totally, that actually makes a lot of sense even for my own like path with this, because I think performing was very much like being a classical musician is the highest form of perfectionism. It's all about getting, literally people applaud for you after you do it, if you do it well. And I think, yeah, I think, and that is, I think my challenge now, even with this project, is continuing to find the place that it comes from, that's not about that approval from somebody else. It's not about somebody else being like, that's the best piece of art I've ever seen made, because I don't think most people are going to say that about what I create. It's a very simple, like in the moment, expressive thing. And I think like constantly looking for like the place where that lives inside of me versus outside the world is a battle that I think was set up very early on for me in my life, of like, finding those boundaries.
And almost regardless of what you create, some people will like it more than others, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sure, there's people who look at the Sistine Chapel or the Mona Lisa and they're like, and then
Exactly.
other people who are, agape.
Exactly. And I think that, again, like when I started drawing, I think that was the beginning of like cracking into that like perfectionism shield. I like that. Was like actually coming to terms with like making a piece of art that like took 3 minutes. I did it with a pen on a moving train, and actually being like, I really like this. Like, I really like this. And I actually don't care what anyone else thinks. And I think like when I first started drawing, I would kind of hide it from other people on the train so they couldn't see, so they couldn't judge it. And then like, eventually sort of like built up that muscle enough where I was like, I actually don't care if the person next to me is impressed by this. Like, I am impressed by it. I enjoy it. And again, I feel like that was like such a process of like taking back what kind of got took away in that like classical music environment, and also just the way that I grew up and the way that I experienced the world into that point, and also now. Like it's
Yeah, I remember an art teacher once, I think I was in like 8th grade. And at that point, I think I was, probably one of 2 or 3 kind of like real art students in the art class, right? Everybody else was just forced to take this elective.
Yeah.
I was one of a couple who really like had an interest in art. And I remember the first major crack in the perfectionism shield for me, it blew my mind, was this art teacher saying to us as we were drawing an apple or whatever it was, draw what you see, not what you think it ought to look like.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was instantly amazed at how much time I spend erasing and adjusting and erasing and adjusting, and oftentimes not approaching the outcome I want because I'm not really trusting my senses in drawing what I'm seeing. I've decided that curve is not really what an apple looks like, whether it's what I'm seeing or not. And so I'm trying to fix it into what I think an apple ought to look like in order to have, the ultimate goal is to have the art teacher or somebody else walk by and be like, now that is a perfect apple, right? Like,
yeah. That is powerful. That is really powerful. And I think that's the other sort of like one of the many accidental benefits of drawing in pen is trusting that instinct in you,
right,
to actually to be able to create what you see, or what you feel. Because I think for me, that's a big thing I focus on too, is like a line can be totally wrong, like, from a technical standpoint, from like all these things, but it can say everything you need it to say, but you have to let it be uninterrupted. You can't let all those other forces interact with it. And I feel like when you draw in pen, it sort of like challenges you to believe in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the other piece about your artwork, and again, this is my interpretation, so I might be misinterpreting, or you may not see it this way.
Yeah.
But one of the things I like so much about the artwork that you do share, and what I love about it is like, how do I say this correctly? Based on maybe like technical standards, a lot of what you share is sort of incomplete or unfinished, right? There might be sort of a person and then like kind of one half of their body and the other half is not included, right? Like it's just, and when you first started in the very beginning of this podcast, you talked about drawing from life and not liking to draw from life. And I was like that too. I didn't like to draw from life. And I think drawing from life puts into my mind this idea of like still life type paintings and portraits. And so there's a question of what is it are you trying to capture? And when you do a still life, right, when you have that horn of that wicker horn of fruit and you're trying to paint that, or that vase of flowers, the goal is to capture what's there such that you could hold your painting up next to the real life one and it would be hard to distinguish one from the other, right?
Yeah.
What you're capturing, to me anyway, is less the visual aesthetic of what's there and more the gestalt of the moment.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Like you're capturing a moment, right? And it may not necessarily, like every bit of shading or every tinge of color might not be like exact to what's actually in front of you, but it creates whatever connection you had with when you chose that person, dog, horse, whatever it was as your subject, pair of shoes.
Yep.
What you capture is what was there in the moment that drew you to it.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I watched, I think your first episode of this podcast, you talked about meaning making.
Yes.
And that I was like, yes, like, because I think that's what I'm constantly doing out in the world myself, is like making, like, when I see somebody, sitting like this, I wonder, like, why is that how they're holding themselves today? Like, what's going on for them internally? Like, have I ever felt like that? Why am I seeing that? Do I feel like that today? Like, I'm looking, like, things are not meaningless in the world. And I'm constantly looking for my own entertainment and also my own sense of like, what is this all about? To find those beautiful little stories that are encapsulated in like one moment of time. And that's how I make meaning for myself. And I think sharing that is how I'm trying to make meaning for other people, is to like be like, this is happening around us all the time. And there's so much garbage that's happening in the world around us. And you can look at that, but you can also find these like beautiful little moments that are just hidden in the everyday, and to me, that's where I find a lot of solace and interest and joy. And I think like continuing to believe in that gives me a lot of like meaning and purpose, I think. Yeah. So
I'm also wondering, and again, maybe this is off, but I felt like I heard some of it when you were talking about your brother before, and the like decision, like, is drawing still important to me and does it still matter? And I wonder if an aspect of the meaning making is also doing something that in some way perpetuates and honors his memory.
100%. I think when, anyone that met Matt, like, just like, he lit people up, and it's so rare. I don't know anybody else who had that effect, and so quickly, into so many people. And it came from a genuine place. Like he was not, it was for no point other than that's just like who he was. And I think, yeah, I think that was absolutely a huge part of like when I was in this moment of like my pottery shop just got like destroyed. And do I even care about this thing? Like, what am I even doing with this? Am I really gonna like try and make a career out of this? Does this even matter?
Right.
And I think the answer was like, it does matter. Like this is what I possess
Yeah.
to bring that into the world. And there's like, it's for him. It's definitely for him. Like I dedicated the book to him. Like that was like,
Right.
I couldn't wait to write those lines.
He was an artist, right? So
Was, yeah.
so like, I mean, the thought I was having, the way it resonated with me in my personal experience was, when I said like a profound experience like that can either be the reason why you never accomplish anything great, or it could be the reason why you have to.
Yeah.
Is, if I think about, for example, losing my mother, if I keep my focus on the pain and the sorrow and maybe even the feeling of abandonment as a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
then I can't, like, I'm crippled. I can't move. I can't do anything, right?
Yeah.
But like, if I look back on my professional career, and I think this is why marketing really wasn't for me. The careers I've had some longevity in have been personal training and psychology, and now coaching, which I consider sort of connected to both of them because I do fitness coaching too. So personal training and psychology. I've made, the last 20 some odd years of my career about helping people. And to me, making a career out of helping people and raising children who are going to be hopefully, people talk about creating a better world for their children. I'm trying to create better children for the world, right? Like,
I love that. I love that.
like those things to me are things that honor my mother's memory, honor her legacy, right? And so I could either get so caught up in my own pain that I'm crippled, or I could get caught up in trying to create a life that honors the person I lost,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I wonder if that's what I'm hearing some of Drawn on the Way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely. I mean, I know that like it's very much about honoring, yeah, his legacy. And like, it's, my brother was also the most unique person I've ever met. Like he was,
It's a big statement coming from you.
Yeah, it's quite a, yeah, like
characters, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm like, I was an opera singer and marketer and illustrator, and I'm like boring compared to my brother. Like he taught himself so many things. He was an outdoorsman. Like he's like who you wanted to know in the apocalypse. and he like, but he was also an artist and a scholar, and he was all these things. And like a short way to say it would be like he was like strange. I mean, I think to normal people he would seem strange, but he was so unique, and he never gave that up about himself. And so I think that also for me, like when I have these moments of like, what am I doing? Does this even make sense? I'm like, what would Matt say? Like, and what did Matt like value in his life was like being who he was unapologetically. And so I feel like that's in my work, is like saying to people, like, no matter who you are, like you have worth and you have value, and like I see it, and I want to affirm that for you. And also like, yeah, using that to drive myself and just be like, it's okay. Like you don't have to walk the beaten path. Like, and you're not on that path, and neither was Matt. And you're gonna keep, you bring his way of seeing the world forward with me while I go. So yes, he's bolstered this. I think it would have been really easy in some ways to just like abandon this in the aftermath of everything. But in many ways, I think he like caught like, really, yeah, like bolstered that. It's just like, this is what I have to do. I have to do this. If I abandon this, then I'm abandoning him too. So
yeah, makes it feel big, right? Important.
Yeah.
It feels like it's no longer a thing you do because you like to doodle. right? It's sort of a responsibility you have.
Yeah. I think that's the responsibility is actually a great word, because I think that is something, like when I'm sort of doubting whether this is like, when I'm doubting myself, I think responsibility is a really good word. It's like this, I have to bring this to the world. And I think like these days with social media too, it gets really confusing, because it's like you share and where, you want, like, I think we want to have this huge viral impact, but then on the days when I'm feeling like, where is this going? How am I growing this? And I'll get like a message from somebody who's like, what you say here really made me feel better today. Or like if I gave a drawing to someone recently, and they were like, to a stranger, and they were like, I was having a really upside down day, and you just turned it right side up. And I was like, that is Matt. That is me. That like, if that's all I ever did in my life, like I'd be like, good job, so yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So what's on the horizon now? What's next?
Great question.
What are we falling ass backward into now?
Actually, I'm it's a great question. The book is where I'm letting that lead, and I'm letting it sort of like, it's opened up a lot of opportunities to teach and to talk to people about this. And so I'm following where that leads now. And I think, kind of continuing to see where I fall into this, and where like in some ways less planning on my part, and less like, where does this go? It needs to go exactly here. I think kind of like following that North Star of like this message of you are a work of art, and also connecting people to their creativity and without judgment. I feel like I'm a flag bearer for that. So I'm going where that leads at this point, which I hope is more teaching, more talking about it, and more writing about it. That's I have another book in mind that I'm working on in the back of my head. So that's my hope, is just to keep drawing and writing and talking and helping other people see the world a little bit differently.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Doing any singing?
Not so much singing. I sing in my house to my dog. But I'm not doing so much singing these days in public, just for myself, really. So yeah.
Well,
yeah.
the reason I ask is for the people who might be watching this on YouTube or listening on any platform, on Spotify or Apple podcasts or anything of that sort. I mean, we're talking to somebody here who is, not a hobbyist, and not even like a good singer, but we're talking about like legit professional quality, like elite level on stage opera singer, right? Like when Sarah talks about singing, she was singing opera for, like, we're not talking about she was like in the community production of, whatever. I mean, we're talking about like real professional opera singer, and with a master's degree from the Princeton Choir College, and really a remarkable, incredible talent. And if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have absolutely predicted that today you would be doing incredible and interesting things, but I would not have predicted it would be drawing.
Me either, for the record.
Yeah.
Yeah, me either.
I would have predicted that you would have been in theater and music, singing, but the part I think I still would have predicted, just knowing you, would have been that you wouldn't just be performing, you would be using it to accomplish something more.
Yeah. And I think so. And I think, I never rule out singing like on any public way again. Like I still keep it up. I still, every once in a while, I'm like, yeah, I still got it. But I think, I found a funny little way to like do what I've always wanted to do ever since I was a kid, which is like tell stories and make people listen. So I feel like that's, in a funny way, like, this is this is the most comfortable way that I found to do that, like where I get to do it really unfettered. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you, I mean, you look very like, I mean, as somebody who, I mean, we haven't been in touch like this for a long while. It's been over Facebook or Instagram, but
Yeah.
Messenger, right? But you look at ease, comfortable, and it
Yeah.
suits you.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I think the more I'm trusting all of this, the more I'm like, oh, okay. I'll
Right.
just go where you lead, wherever that is.
It would be very easy to rule out, writing a book on drawing or even making a career out of drawing when you have a master's degree in like opera performance music, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like I don't know what to compare it to, but it would be easy to say, no, I've got all this training in this area. I need to, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, maybe I'm doing something like that too, because I'm choosing not to do therapy anymore.
Yeah. 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 I think that's interesting. I think like you said it, like the thread though for you is like helping people.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's,
Yeah.
I think that's something I found too is like, yeah, I think abandoning some of those like preconceived notions of what success is and like, yeah, and kind of like being like, okay, I thought I was gonna do this, but I'm not doing that. And why? And maybe there are really compelling reasons why I'm not doing that, but I'm still doing some element of what I thought was in my original plan. Yeah.
For sure. And I can resonate with a lot of it personally. I same thing with me with marketing. When you say like these people, these clients who don't care about you and they don't care about, I would go so far as to say most of the clients that I dealt with didn't even really care about their product. They cared about their shareholders,
Mm-hmm.
which ultimately meant they cared about their own bank account, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't, right? Like financial management is an important part of creating a life of thriving, and there's no need, like it's okay to have a healthy financial situation, right? There's no shame in that. But yeah, these people are spend their lives selling products that they don't even care about the product, right? And so it's uninspiring for me. It was uninspiring to be around.
Yeah.
What I would say is that even as a personal trainer, I was happiest working with the I don't know, I don't want to call it the higher end because that sounds judgmental, but with the more like elite end of the human performance continuum. I
Yeah.
like working with people who are competitive or athletic, or I worked with a few Olympians. I worked with some Division I competitors. I worked with people like you who were not athletic competitors at the time, but worked out like you were,
Yeah.
So and as a therapist and also as a personal trainer, the problem I have is when you're focused all the time on what's wrong, your worldview shifts, at least my worldview shifts, and it feels like nobody's okay. If you go to work and for 8 hours a day, you sit in a room with people working and you're talking about what's wrong, talking about their depression, talking about their anxiety, and those things are real and they do need treatment. And I'm not suggesting they don't.
Yeah.
But for me, I leave work feeling like nobody's okay. And it's hard for me to carry that around.
Yeah.
And of course, there's lots of people who might be doing great that I don't see in my office, but I don't see them.
Right.
And so working with people who have had these difficulties and are thriving, right? That fuels me, right? Working on what's right and how do we make it better and how do we build it?
Yeah.
And that's why your projects so like interesting to me, and I've followed them since day one.
Yeah.
And help share them and promote them as much as I can because
Amazing.
they're really incredible and inspiring and vulnerable and intimate and all things I value so much.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that on so many levels, including your support. Which I'm always so glad for whenever I see your name pop up. It's the best. But yeah, I think like to what you said too. I think there's something to like finding like I read something recently that was like talking about like, you know, what's yours to do in the world. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's like what you're saying too. And like, it's like finding like there are many things that you can do in the world and you can probably do them really well. But finding the thing that's really yours to do, I think that's the challenge. And it's really nice when you begin to find a window into that of like, this is, for some reason, this is the way that I'm supposed to be helping in the world. And I think it's really nice when you find that.
I never would have picked this pair of pants out by myself, but man, they fit really well.
Exactly, like exactly. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
well, Sarah, I can't wait to see what comes next for you, because everything, you know, since you started with that first doodle, it's been a rocket ship. It may not have always felt like that to you, but as an outsider watching, it's looked like a rocket ship, and it's really inspiring. Why don't we tell folks how to find you, all the socials, if they want to get in touch with you, see your artwork, buy your book?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, you can find me at Drawn on the Way on Facebook, Instagram. I'm on the TikToks now. I'm trying to be a young kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Drawn on the Way on all those places, and then drawnontheway.com if you want to find out more about my mission, and search Drawn on the Way on Amazon or bookshop.org if you want to buy from your favorite local bookshop. If you Google Drawn on the Way in Amazon, you will find me. Google it on bookshop.org. So yeah, it's on my website too.
And if people wanted to get in contact with you, can they message you through your website?
Yeah, you can message me through my website or DM me on Instagram, or my email is hi@drawnontheway.com. And so yes, many ways you can find me on my website or Instagram. It's great.
Terrific. Thank you so much for your time, Sarah. This has been fantastic. Personally, selfishly, for catching up, but I think also for the people who are in my online communities and watching or listening. It's such an interesting and inspiring story, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you to everyone who is watching on YouTube or listening either on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, or on Apple Podcasts. I know that people are busy and your time is a valuable commodity. You can spend it lots of ways. So I really appreciate and value everyone who chooses to spend their time with me, invested in this message. And so if you're looking for more about what I do or the Growth and Thriving Project, my website is Growth and Thriving, all spelled out, growthandthriving.com. You can message me through there. On Facebook, our page is Growth and Thriving LLC. It's not spelled out, it's an ampersand, Growth and Thriving LLC. And we have two communities there. One is Growth and Thriving After Trauma. The other is Thriving Fathers, Parenting After Trauma. On YouTube, you can find all the podcasts and videos at Growth and Thriving LLC. And like I said, the podcast is available on Spotify, on Google, and on Apple. So thank you everyone so much for your time. This is Dr. Jerry Sunshine Novak signing off for now, saying just keep growing until you're thriving.
Love it.